Welcome to Days of Roar, the Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with Detroit Free Press Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold in the last 10 days of his life without a baby and a child as we come down the stretch to both opening day in the Detroit Tiger 2025 baseball season and Evan Petzold's impending fatherhood. Ev, what's up?
Yeah, a lot has happened this week, but no baby Petzold yet. So Savannah and I, we've been told this is going to happen at some point between now and the first week of April. So it's kind of just a waiting game right now. The good news is everyone is healthy. Our baby's doing great. Savannah's doing well. I'm hanging in there as I prepare to become a dad. All of this is happening a little bit earlier than we expected, but we're very blessed that everyone is healthy and we're in good hands. As for the Tigers, like I said, it's been a very busy week. But before we look back on what happened, I think it's important that we look at what's coming this week. The spring training is over. The Tigers have departed from Lakeland, Florida. They did that after Sunday's game. They traveled to San Francisco. They're going to play exhibition games Monday and Tuesday against the Giants at Oracle Park. From there, the Tigers will travel to Los Angeles for opening day on Thursday against the Dodgers. So we have two exhibitions in San Francisco, Monday and Tuesday, and then opening day in Los Angeles. That's Thursday. Since last week's podcast, the Tigers have optioned both third baseman Jace Jung and right-hander Kaider Montero to AAA Toledo. The Tigers also set their five-man starting rotation with Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Casey Mize, and Jackson Jobe. And the Tigers sent Kenta Maeda to the bullpen, so that is a $10 million reliever. We also got injury updates on center fielder Parker Meadows and outfielder third baseman Matt Vierling. Remember, Parker Meadows is dealing with a right upper arm nerve issue, and Matt Vierling has a right shoulder strain. We still don't have a timetable for either of them to return, but at the very earliest, it seems like we won't see them until May or maybe even June. Here's the latest on Matt Vierling. He is initiating a hitting progression and has been cleared to advance his shoulder strengthening exercises, but it doesn't sound like he's throwing yet. Still, he's making progress. That's good news on Matt Vierling. Slow and steady there with him. And then the latest on Parker Meadows, he underwent a nerve conduction test in Phoenix, and the experts have prescribed at least one more month of rest, which means he won't be cleared to throw until late April at the earliest. Remember, he hasn't thrown a baseball since late February in the first spring training game, hasn't played since then. Basically, the nerve in his arm, it still hasn't woken up. Remember, I talked to Dr. Brian Scholes, the team physician for the Los Angeles Angels, and he told me that the nerve could wake up in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. It's looking like 2 months and maybe even longer. So that's bad news on Parker Meadows. And with the Meadows update, the Tigers signed outfielder Manuel Margot, who Mark has mentioned on this podcast for the last 3 weeks, to a 1-year, $1.3 million contract with another $1.2 million in bonuses for plate appearances. So it's a potential for $2.5 million in the 2025 season. He is a 30-year-old right-handed hitter who performs best against left-handed pitchers. So expect to see Manuel Margot in the starting lineup, likely in center field for opening day against Dodgers left-hander Blake Snell. I don't think he will play against many righties, but he is going to be in there against lefties as often as possible, even if it's coming off the bench to face the lefty reliever. So look for Manuel Margot in the opening day lineup. The Tigers added him. Bad news on Parker Meadows. So-so news on Matt Vierling. And then Jace Jung to AAA Toledo, Kenta Maeda to AAA Toledo. They set the rotation. All the things are kind of starting to come together. It's been a really busy week.
Very busy. Lot of sad news about Parker Meadows because let's call it like it is. Last 50 games of the season, that was the player that was stirring the drink offensively, defensively on the bases. Not good. That he will not likely play till the middle of May at the earliest, and God knows when at the latest. Time to see what else there is to do. I can promise you Riley Green in center field, not an option they're even willing to consider right now. Let's jump into the big two. Right on this topic. How does the Manuel Margot signing impact the final roster cuts?
Pick 2 of 3 just became pick 1 of 3. And the 3 players I'm hinting at here, Justyn-Henry Malloy, Spencer Torkelson, and Jahmai Jones. Before Manuel Margot, the Tigers could have carried both Jahan and Tork on the opening day roster. or Jahan and Jahmai Jones, or Tork and Jahmai Jones. After Manuel Margot, the Tigers only have one spot open for those three players. And by the way, I think the Tigers are keeping Wenceel Perez for several reasons, but most notably because someone has to play center field against right-handed pitchers, and it's not going to be Manuel Margot, and it's not going to be Riley Green, so it has to be Wenceel Perez. Wenceel Perez is better against righties than lefties. And again, like I said, someone's got to play center field against righties. I think it's going to be Wenceel Perez out of the gate until Matt Vierling gets healthy or until Parker Meadows gets healthy. But anyway, the debate here is Jahan or Tork or Jahmai Jones. And let's be honest, it's likely down to Jahan or Tork. One of those two players seemingly is going to be the primary designated hitter for the Tigers to start the 2025 season. Work with me here on this. So against right-handed pitchers, if you have Riley Green in left field, Wenceel Perez in center field, and Kerry Carpenter in right field against right-handed pitchers, who's your DH? Kerry Carpenter's in right field. So you're looking at Jahan or Tork. Like, even if those guys don't perform as well against righties, you need someone to be your DH, and it's probably going to be Jahan or Tork if Kerry Carpenter is in right field. And now you go and you take a look at it. Okay, how about against left-handed pitchers? You have Riley Green in left field, Manuel Margot in center field. This is against left-handed pitchers. Who is your right fielder and who is your DH? You have this Jahan/Tork option. You have Wenceel Perez, who struggles against lefties, or you have a bunch of left-handed hitters on the bench who can't hit lefties. Trey Sweeney, Zach McKinstry, Kerry Carpenter. So in that case, you're probably going to just bite the bullet and play Wenceel Perez in right field, even though lefties aren't the best matchup for him. And then either Jahan or Tork, they get to rake as the DH because they perform better against lefties anyway. So if you followed me through all of that, it sure seems like either Jahan or Tork will be the primary designated hitter, with Kerry Carpenter also getting some time there. And to me, Justyn-Henry Malloy is the best fit. If I had to pick between Tork and Jahan, and both of them had great spring trainings, I'd pick Jahan. Here's where I'm at with this, okay? Justyn-Henry Malloy does not have anything else to prove in AAA. Jahan is a 272 hitter with an 882 OPS and 199 games at the AAA level. Spencer Torkelson at the AAA level, he hits 236 with an 807 OPS and 133 games. So Jahan has better AAA numbers than Tork. Additionally, Jahan makes elite swing decisions. He rarely chases, and I know he has some swing and miss issues, even on pitches inside the strike zone, but Jahan swings at the right pitches. Tork can be a smart hitter, but he doesn't always swing at the best pitches. He can be prone to chasing, especially on those pitches that are down in a way that sometimes he gets a little bit too happy and tries to pull them, and he swings right through them. That's those down and away pitches that he swings in and misses that quite a bit. Whereas Jahan doesn't chase, rarely ever. He's going to swing at good pitches. Also, Jahan is capable of playing left field, even if he isn't good at defense. Plus, he actually looks good at first base, which is a new position for him. Meanwhile, Tork has played just 6 innings in the outfield in his entire professional career. It happened once in spring training, and the Tigers didn't do it again. So Tork is literally a DH only on this roster, whereas Jahan can come off the bench to face a lefty reliever. Let's say he pinch hits for Wenceel Perez. Then you move Riley Green to center field for the final 3 innings, and Jahan stands in left field. You can do that with Jahan, but you can't do that with Tork. And then the cherry on top, Jahan raked in his role in the postseason last year. He batted second in a lineup against one of the best left-handed pitchers in baseball, Framber Valdez. That tells me everything I need to know about how the Tigers feel about Justyn-Henry Malloy. Wouldn't you think the Tigers would want Jahan in the lineup to face lefty Blake Snell on opening day if he batted second in the playoffs against Framber Valdez? For me, that's case closed. I'm sorry, Tork, but I think it's going to be Justyn-Henry Malloy, and that would be my pick too.
What he said, no, I don't think I could make a more compelling case for how I feel about it. Justyn-Henry Malloy is a better hitter than Spencer Torkelson. And I just get the vibe from AJ Hinch that that's how he feels about it. Now, I do want to say something because it's important sometimes to praise guys because it's way too often that we have negative things to say about guys. Spencer Torkelson, you deserve kudos, my man. Truly do. I've never seen your swing look uglier. Came to spring training this year. It was slightly better. And really what I've seen the last 2 weeks, you've been on time. On time is good torque. Torque 23. It's there. I just wonder if he can go to Toledo, maintain the same attitude. He's going to get at bats here at some point in time. He needs to not get discouraged. But Justyn-Henry Malloy is my choice, and my opinion would be it's going to be AJ Hinch's choice to make the roster. Tork's going to Toledo.
And Mark, too, though, right? Like, we have to talk about one more thing in that element when it comes to Tork going to AAA Toledo. It's like, this has kind of been what's been destined for him since the offseason, right? Like, the Tigers go out and they sign Gleyber Torres and they move Colt Keith to first base, which immediately puts Spencer Torkelson on the outside looking in, even coming into spring training. So yes, while he had a great spring, I don't know if the plan was ever for Spencer Torkelson to actually be on the opening day roster. Like, yes, there was an opportunity with some DH at-bats, but when it really comes down to it, who do you want to give DH at-bats to? The guy who hit second in the playoffs against, Framber Valdez, or Spencer Torkelson, who was struggling at that point. And now obviously we've seen some things and it's really good and you got to commend him for it. I want to see if he can keep doing it at AAA Toledo. And even to go back to his 31 home run season that he had in 2023, as great as that was, he still hit 233. I'm not trying to nitpick every little bit of his game, but the defense wasn't great. He hit 233. He didn't OPS 800. He OPS like 750. So I want to see if Spencer Torkelson can go to AAA Toledo. I want to see if the defense is going to hold up at first base, which I think it will. And I want to see if he can further become a better hitter. Like, we know the power is in there. We know he can pack a punch. I want to see if this guy can develop a swing and develop an approach in the batter's box. And I like what he's doing right now, trying to go over the second baseman's head. And if he's going to be early on it, he's pulling it. If he's late, he's going oppo. He has the type of swing that can do that. He has the type of power that can do that. I want to see if this guy can mold his game into being a 250 hitter with 25 plus home runs. And I think if he's able to do that while playing solid defense at first base, there is a spot for Spencer Torkelson on the 2026 opening day roster. Because Gleyber Torres, it's only a 1-year deal. Colt Keith, maybe he eventually slides back to second base. It seems like that can make some sense. So I don't think we should just write off Spencer Torkelson if he gets sent to AAA Toledo, because I do think that there is a spot for him on this team in the future. And there is a spot for him to still become the face of the franchise that everyone expected him to be. Like, yes, he has a long way to get back to what the expectations were when he was the number 1 overall pick in 2020. But I still think there's a pathway to him being a real player on this team. And this team is a good team now, right? Like, this is a team that's been to the playoffs. And I think Spencer Torkelson can be a key contributor in 2026, even if it doesn't really work out for him in 2025, not only because of Justyn-Henry Malloy and what he was able to do in spring training, but also because of the roster construction, the fact that you went out and you got Gleyber Torres and you put Colt Keith at first base without ever seeing Colt Keith play an inning at first base. Like, that told me from the very beginning the Tigers were putting Spencer Torkelson on the outside looking in. And it seems like that could be the case once again as we come up to opening day and they have to make the final roster cuts.
Look, if Zierling and Meadows were healthy, I don't care what Tork would have done. We would never have even started to have this discussion. A. B, 26 weeks, 162 games. That's a long season. A lot of things happen. People are primary, players on teams that don't start the year in the major leagues. Spencer Torkelson, I'm sure, is getting an opportunity this year. He's going to get at-bats. And the Mark Gorash saying, if you hit, you play. That's pretty much cannibalizing A.J. Hinch. If you hit, you play. Period. End of story. All right, let's go to question 2 of the big 2. Did the Tigers get the 2025 rotation correct?
I think the Tigers did. Here's the starting rotation. Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Casey Mize, Jackson Jobe. To get there, the Tigers put Jackson Jobe and Casey Mize in the rotation, sent Kenta Maeda to the bullpen, and optioned Keider Montero to AAA Toledo. I'm really happy it turned out that way because I think that's how it should have turned out. Am I worried about Jackson Jobe? Yes, of course I am. I'm actually really worried about Jackson Jobe against the best hitters in the world. But do I think he deserves the opportunity? 100%. As for Kenta Maeda, he was good in spring training, but his velocity dipped in the 3rd and 4th innings when he started games, which was a clear indication he needed to be in the bullpen. I think the stuff is a lot better than it was last year, and I think he actually could be sneaky really good for the Tigers this season, but he isn't built to be a starting pitcher anymore, and that's okay. He might never start another game in his career, but I could see him pitching a few more years out of the bullpen, albeit not with the Tigers after this season. Let's not forget, too, he had a 3.86 ERA in 42 innings as a reliever last season. And I think the stuff is better now than it was then. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to Kenta Maeda out of the bullpen. I have some high hopes for him. We'll see how it plays out. And then you have Casey Mize. He really separated himself as the clear-cut number 4 starter after reinventing himself as a pitcher. He implemented 3 slider variations. He increased the velocity of his splitter. up to 90 miles an hour. And then he located his fastball down in the zone to work hand in hand with that splitter. I think the splitter can still be a calling card for him. It was back when he was at Auburn. It hasn't been the same since, but now it's finally missing bats again. I think the fastball down only helps the splitter even more. And then throwing the fastball down and the splitter down, that helps the fastball as well. Like those two pitches really do pair well together when he's working down in the zone. I think his work that he put in the offseason showed in the spring training results. He allowed just 2 runs in 16 innings, got to cut down on the 7 walks, but I like the 18 strikeouts. He's finally starting to miss some bats. Now we need to see him do it in the regular season, but he certainly earned his way into the rotation, and I'm glad the Tigers rewarded him. There's also something else I like about Casey Mize that doesn't show up in a box score. He's a fighter, man. Like so many times last year, he had to battle to pitch into the 5th and the 6th innings, even without a lot of strikeouts. I'm excited to see that same mindset with better stuff this season. I think the sky is the limit for Casey Mize. Just can't wait to see him, kind of do it over and over again in a 5-day routine against real big league pitchers, having to go 5, 6, 7 innings every time out. I'm excited to see what kind of version the Tigers get of Casey Mize. And then Kiter Montero gets sent to AAA Toledo. He has a ton of potential, but he needs to figure out the mechanics of his delivery before he comes back to the Tigers. Like again, he can be really good and he has weapons, but it's just too many random non-competitive pitches. Like you get some good sliders and then suddenly he loses it. You get some nasty changeups and then he loses it. Same with the curveball, same with the fastball location. Like I just think he needs more polish, specifically with his delivery, but he's one developmental piece away from really blossoming. I cannot wait to see Kiter Montero once AAA pitching coach Doug Bachler is done with him. But the Tigers go into the 2025 season with a starting rotation of Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Casey Mize, and Jackson Jobe. I think that's the way it should be.
Well, first I'd like to say, I hope people that have listened to Days of Roar, especially since spring training began and maybe before, as far as this rotation, exactly what we've been saying for the last 3 weeks. And first of all, let me touch on Casey Mize. I want to give Casey Mize a hug, man. I mean, holy smokes. You understand how much personal growth and honesty it takes to go home 5 years after being the number 1 pick in the major league draft, looking at your career and going, damn, I'm pretty mediocre. What can I do to get better? I really, really need to get better. And in the last 2 years, he massively improved his fastball velocity. Then this offseason, he went home, scrapped literally every secondary pitch he had, remade his slider into 3 different versions of a slider, and totally changed the way he threw his split, which makes me want to just cheer him. I want to cheer him. He had such a disappointing split before this year. Added 3 miles an hour to it, got it to go vertical, and it's just a beautiful thing. I don't think, I don't know if people remember, but I asked Jake Rogers when he was on in the winter about the inning that Casey Mize threw 7 straight splits because I'd never seen him do it before, and it just so excited me. And obviously, Casey Mize felt the same way about it because he went home and figured out how to throw a way better split than he's been throwing for the last 5 years. And it's a damn weapon now. So where we're at, phase 1 completed. Phase 2, do it consistently. Phase 3, be really good. A lot. Let's see if we can do phase 2 now. We've done phase 1. As far as Jackson Jobe goes, you had to do it this way. You didn't have much choice about doing it. You had to allow him to face major league hitters 2, 3, 4 times here. It has nothing even remotely close to spring training is what regular season real major league baseball is. You're facing the best hitters 2, 3 times. Even the bottom of the order can hit. Your mistakes are going to get crushed. They're sequencing way more sophisticated than what you see in spring training. The bar of execution is way higher. And it's time for Jackson Jobe, if he's going to be good, to have to deal with that adversity. Execute sequences, find out what you're good at, what you're not good at, how Fetter can help you, how Lund can help you, how Nieves can help you, how the guys upstairs can help you. Can you execute game plans? And either you're going to succeed, fail, get better, have to go down. We're going to find out. But you had to do it this way. We know what Kiter Montero can do, and it excites the hell out of me. At the same time, Kiter Montero did not get a swing and miss on his fastball in the last outing. As good as the outing was, he retired 13 of the last 16 hitters, gave up 2 hits and a walk, no runs. Pretty damn good. However, Kiter Montero, he still has room to improve, got a lot of swag. First guy they're calling up, excited about him. This is the way it's got to go. The other things I wanted to mention, Jack Flaherty looked really good. Last outing, velocity down 1 to 2 miles an hour from last year. Be interesting to see if that ticks immediately back up in the regular season. Reese Olson, holy smokes, really, really good today. A little better defense in the outfield. Probably gets out of his outing without allowing any runs. Change up markedly better if that was possible. And real excited to see what he can do. I think the rotation is as potentially good, as sexy as it's been, in almost 20 years, like 10 years, 10, 12, 14 years. So excited about what all those guys can do. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to interview the Dodgers beat writer from the LA Times, Jack Harris, who just returned from covering the Dodgers in Japan. We're going to talk about the opening game series, Japan, what the Dodgers have in store for 2025. We'll be back in 6 minutes.
I'd like to welcome Jack Harris, the Los Angeles Dodgers beat writer for the LA Times, to the Days of Roar podcast. Opening day for the Tigers is Thursday against the Dodgers, so who better to bring on the show than this guy? Not only does Jack cover the Dodgers, but he also placed in the top 10 for beat reporting in the latest APSE contest, so he's one of the best in the business. Jack Harris, thanks for coming on the pod.
Cool. Thank you for the kind introduction there, Evan.
Before we talk about the Dodgers, Jack, you just spent a week in Japan. Share with us how unique and great that was.
It was really cool. I had never really been overseas in a really different culture like that before the Dodgers opened in Korea last year. And it was just interesting how, when they went to Korea, you can really tell like the game was going on in a lot of different ways, right? And it was still a big deal. Like Ohtani was making his debut, the Dodgers and the Padres, obviously the Padres had Ha-Seong Kim. So there was a lot of attention around it, but going to Japan this year was just, it was such a different experience. Everywhere you went, there were reminders of the game. The amount of products that I saw Shohei Ohtani's face on selling, like, it is unbelievable. It is lasagna, it is suits, it is watches, it is headphones, it is everything you could imagine. He's on all these vending machines. Nike had a lot of ads for Roki Sasaki and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And I think, even for someone like me who is around the team on a daily basis, and I think the same applied to, a lot of the players, it was just interesting that, you knew that Ohtani was really famous over there and you knew these guys were a really big deal, but I think to get to see that up close and just see how much attention is on them and the kind of role they have in the culture over there, especially Ohtani, was a pretty eye-opening thing. And then obviously the crowds at the game and just the attention around the games was at another level too. So really interesting way to start the season and a good kind of eye-opener about, when people say that Ohtani is famous, like, it is beyond, I think, even what you can kind of comprehend until you're actually over there.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too about the atmosphere at the Tokyo Dome for the 2-game series, right? It's, Dodgers against Cubs, and there's so many Japanese players, on those two teams, right? You have Shohei Ohtani and Roki Sasaki and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And then for the Cubs, you have Shota Imanaga and Seiya Suzuki. Like, what was the atmosphere like in the Tokyo Dome? Just kind of like day in, day out there for you.
It was interesting. So they play like the 2 exhibition games against the Japanese teams. And for those games, those teams as fans, especially the Hanshin Tigers, shout out to that fan base, because when they're hitting, it's like a soccer game. It's loud. They're chanting. They're banging drums. They're banging these bam sticks. One of their guys hit a 3-run home run off Blake Snell in one of the exhibition games. It was probably like one of the loudest moments in the stadium the whole week. And then when they're pitching, like, it's dead silent. It's almost like watching golf. Like, you almost feel uncomfortable, like where the press box was there. You're kind of down in the seats and you almost felt uncomfortable talking at too loud of a volume. So when the MLB teams played, it was a little more, especially the first day, I'd say like subdued. The most interesting part was when Ohtani would come to the plate and it would be dead silent until he would swing or he would foul off a pitch or he would take a pitch, on the edge of the zone, like anything that happened. And people would just gasp. And then it led up to him hitting his home run, which was a really cool experience, I think, for, especially the way it kind of happened. Like, it wasn't clear it was a home run first, and then they got to celebrate it again when the review confirmed it. And then also when Roki Sasaki made his debut, he was struggling, walked 5 guys over 3 innings. But the way the crowd was just kind of trying to encourage him, almost, it seemed like, to get through that situation and to be able to, only give up 1 run in the 3 innings was just another kind of interesting way to see, again, when you have 50,000 people there that aren't so much cheering for one of the teams, even though I'd say most of the people there were in Dodger stuff, but more cheering for the individual players. It just makes for a very different viewing experience.
So you've covered a lot of famous athletes in LA. You've covered other beats. You're on the Dodgers beat now. You covered LeBron James. So is Shohei Ohtani now take the crown as maybe the most famous athlete you've ever covered? Kind of describe, when you merge the culture of what goes on here and what goes on in Japan, it's kind of a once in a lifetime experience, don't you think?
Yeah, I think probably, like, from just the international kind of attention on him and the level of fame he has in his own country, like, that's something that I don't know if there's a lot of comparisons to, because, luckily for me, our columnist, Dylan Hernandez, he's half Japanese. He understands the culture really well and was kind of explaining, even before we went over and then once we got there, like, it's a very kind of a monoculture kind of place, right? So when one thing gets big, everybody clumps onto it. And so what you have there is literally like an entire country that I think like 25% of the TV, household TV sets in the country were tuned in to, the exhibition game, the first exhibition game they played over there. Like, those are like end of season NFL playoff TV ratings, and probably not even until like you get to the Super Bowl, in the States. So being around somebody who's dealing with that kind of attention and pressure on a day-to-day basis, knowing that an entire country's sort of like sporting pride in a lot of ways is riding on him. I think that's the thing that's really different than even some of the other big athletes in LA. You just don't have that kind of level of, it's kind of like, I think the way that America almost puts so much pressure on the World Cup team every 4 years. Like, that's kind of the pressure he faces, it seems like, on a day-to-day basis. And that is probably the most unique part about it.
From a baseball standpoint, what's the latest on Shohei Ohtani? How do you follow up 54 home runs and 59 steals? And when should we expect to see him pitch again?
When he's going to pitch again is kind of the big question right now. Initially, Dave Roberts set a target of sometime around May, if not sooner, he said, coming into spring training. And it looked like that was about right the way Ohtani's spring training started. He was throwing bullpens. He didn't really show many signs of this left shoulder surgery he had this offseason, of that hampering him very much. But then right when the game started, or right when he started playing the games, he stopped throwing bullpens. He said it's because, my throwing program was going so well that we felt like we could take a break so I wouldn't have to deal with the logistical challenges of trying to continue my throwing program, going over to Japan and potentially facing hitters, then having to stop. So they basically just have hit pause on his buildup as a pitcher for close to the last month now. His last bullpen was February 25th. The expectation is that he'll start building up again now that the team is back stateside, and that probably some point mid-season is when you're going to see him back. To me, it's all a good example of, it's really hard to go back to doing the two-way thing. And I think especially now that, you're on a team where every single game is so important, where his bat provides such a value to the lineup. And while the Dodgers are still going to go ahead and let him try to resume, being a pitcher again, coming off a second Tommy John, I think both he and the team are being deliberately cautious, understanding that, look, we don't need him to make 20 or 25 starts this season. What the Dodgers are really hoping for is that come the end of the year, he's at a place where maybe if he's only made 8 or 10 starts or something like that, where they could still have, one of the better pitchers in the game, which is what he was before he got hurt, available for their pitching staff. So that's why, I'd be surprised at this point if he is pitching again by the end of May. A lot will be determined on how quickly and how well he kind of progresses in his throwing program here over the next couple weeks. But there's still a hope that come the end of the season, he will be a factor for them on the mound in some way, shape, or form. And then once they get to that point, then the next question is going to be, how does he look coming off a second Tommy John, which, obviously not many guys have done successfully in the history of the sport.
And then also, too, what's the early scouting report on Roki Sasaki? Obviously, he made his MLB debut against the Cubs in Japan. Only 3 innings, 1 run, 5 walks. 3 strikeouts, but like the stuff looks insane. What are some of your early thoughts on him?
We're going to be calling him Shotgun Roki because he is wild but deadly. The stuff is really impressive. You know, he comes out in that game in the Tokyo Dome. His first 4 pitches is like 100, 100, 100, 101. The splitter, especially when he's got some command of it. Everybody you talk to on the Dodgers who faced him in live BP settings, you know, players on other teams that faced him in spring games, you know, it's the fact that the pitch, you know, even for Roki's unpredictable. Like it breaks left sometimes, it breaks right sometimes. He throws it. It's basically more like a forkball grip than a traditional splitter grip. So those 2 pitches are really, really good and are why for somebody who is as unpolished as he is at this point, you know, the Dodgers are still kind of expecting him to be one of their better starting pitchers this year. The challenge is going to be kind of what he showed in his debut. When the fastball commands off, it can be really off. Like to walk 5 guys in 3 innings, you know, obviously there's extra adrenaline over there and whatnot, but that was not a promising sign. He didn't get a ton of whiffs with the splitter because a lot of them were ball out of hand, were diving too low below the zone. And then the key part, I think, for him this year is going to be how consistently can he rely on his slider as a third pitch. And actually in that game in Tokyo, you know, he had a big jam in the 3rd inning with the bases loaded, and he was able to get out of it because he executed a couple really good sliders. So, you know, I think what's fair to expect is that there's going to be games that he goes out and probably pitches 5 innings and strikes out 9 or 10 batters and gives up 1 or 2 hits. And then there's going to be games where he's walking guys and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of stress, and he's probably only going 2 or 3 innings. But that's something that I think the Dodgers knew they were kind of getting in the short term and are happy to live with because they see somebody who maybe by the end of this season, but definitely over the next couple years, if he develops in the right way, really should be one of the best pitchers in the game because even right now at 23 years old and 60 some professional starts under his belt, those 2 pitches, the fastball and the splitter, are really, really good.
So you have a once in a lifetime opportunity. You're going to cover a team that has 4 for sure Hall of Famers. So I'm really excited to see Skubal face 4 Hall of Famers on opening night. That's going to be amazing. What a ticket to be in the ballpark to see that. That's a ticket you want to remember. But everybody knows how great a player Ohtani, you know, Betts, Freeman, they know how great they are. But talk to us a little bit about behind the scenes, what kind of people they are, how unique it is to be on a team with just so many great players.
I think this is one of the things that, especially during the Dodgers run to the World Series last year, people around the team were talking a lot about, which is that run really encapsulated what the Dodgers were hoping to create when they brought in all these guys. You know, one thing Andrew Freeman loves to talk about is we don't just get superstars, but we try to find the right players, which is obviously a very cliche answer. But these guys all do mesh relatively well. And a big reason why is, you know, Freddie Freeman is not the most vocal guy. Mookie Betts can be vocal sometimes, but is not that on a day-to-day basis. You know, Shohei Ohtani is not somebody who's getting up in front of the room and you know, leading team meetings or something like that. Even on the pitching staff, like Clayton Kershaw has always been kind of a lead by example guy. It allows them to all coexist really well. Now, in the last couple of years before last year, I think one of the things that the Dodgers struggled with was kind of raising their intensity level when it came to the postseason or handling the pressure when, you know, they did fall behind in a couple division series that they ended up losing against teams that they were much better than. But last year they had the right mix of, you know, those guys. And I think especially it was epitomized with Freddie Freeman playing through the injuries he did, you know, being the kind of guys that can really lead by example, that can all coexist with one another, and that when they're all playing well at the right time, infuse the rest of the team with this belief of like, man, we can beat anybody because we're out here watching Shohei Ohtani, you know, at one point get on base and like 80% of his plate appearances over the last couple of weeks of the season last year. You know, they're watching Freddie Freeman play through his injuries in the postseason and still be productive. They're watching Mookie Betts shake off. You know, he had a couple really bad Octobers before last year, and it was probably their most consistent player over the entire month getting to the World Series. So that can be a tough dynamic, right? Like having this many superstar players, this many big name guys does not always work to put them in the same room together. And I think, you know, even with this group, they had to kind of figure out, you know, how they could still, even as a bunch of like lead by example kind of guys, how they could also still be more impactful leaders in the room. I think last year they found the right balance of that. And it's one of the reasons that on top of all of the talent, the Dodgers feel very good about where they're at going into this season because it was the first time, they saw this collection of players really all click in a high pressure moment and kind of validated, this blueprint and this roster that they had spent years putting together as, okay, when this works, we could be the best team in baseball.
Two of the big name players, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, we did not see them play in Tokyo. What's going on there? And are they going to be active for the upcoming series against the Tigers?
Yeah, the Dodgers' expectation is that they will be. The Dodgers are actually playing an exhibition game today against the Angels. Now, Mookie Betts was a late scratch from the lineup today. He had this stomach virus that he was battling even before the team went to Japan. He lost like 15 pounds in a week. He was feeling better by the time the games actually started. But when you lose that much weight, when you're as dehydrated and as fatigued as he was, the Dodgers decided this is not worth trying to play him. They sent him home early. Freddie Freeman's thing popped up. It was this rib injury that was the other injury he had during the postseason last year. He said it had not bothered him since last October, but when he was taking BP before opening day, he just felt something there. So they sat him out both of those games. He was back in the lineup today, and the Dodgers' hope is that, it was just some scar tissue buildup that he was working through. So neither of those guys seem to be in situations where they're going to be out for a prolonged time. And again, the expectation is they'll both be in the lineup for the home opener on Thursday. I think especially in Freeman's case, there's a lot of guys in that clubhouse right now that are still kind of dealing with some of the lingering injuries that they had last year. That's kind of been a subplot of the spring. But yeah, their expectation is those guys are going to be ready to go by Thursday.
Jack, it's interesting. You take probably the best right fielder in baseball, Mookie Betts, and he was an adequate second baseman, but for the last 2 years, somehow the Dodgers, who always seem to be on the cutting edge of figuring things out before the rest of us in the baseball world, have played him at shortstop. And then after they did it last year, they are doing it again this year. It's not like they don't have a few alternatives there either, or could have acquired alternatives. Give us the thought process from what you're hearing about why they think that's a good spot for him. And is it something that you think will last the entire year this year?
The big kind of underlying thing with the whole Mookie Betts shortstop situation is, one, I don't want to say he didn't like playing the outfield, but he would get bored playing the outfield, I think is the best way to put it. And he felt the exact opposite about the infield. Shortstop, second base are the positions he played growing up. I think he just finds them as more engaging positions on a play-to-play basis. Even something as simple as like not having to run as far on and off the field. Like those are things that matter to him. And when the Dodgers would start experimenting with him on the infield over the last couple of years, like they described it as like half a day off because he wouldn't have to run around in the outfield as much. It was easier on his body. So I think they were kind of always leaning towards giving him more opportunities, primarily at second. The thing that happened last spring was Gavin Lux couldn't make throws from shortstop. Like he was really struggling defensively during spring. And at that point, Mookie was kind of the best option, at least on a short-term basis, to plug in there, play every day, see if he could do it. And if he couldn't, they could always pivot later, which is what they ended up doing. At the trade deadline, they got Tommy Edman, who became their primary shortstop during the playoffs. By that point, Miguel Rojas was also having like a career year unexpectedly, and they felt a little more comfortable with him playing that position if needed. And they put him back in right field for the postseason. This year is kind of a similar situation, I'd say. Now, the Dodgers do have better options at this point of the season than they did last year. But from the start of the winter, I think Mookie Betts wanted to show that, hey, I felt like I made progress at this spot last year. I feel like if I have a whole off season to really learn the position, I can play it at an adequate, if not, above average level. And from the Dodgers' point of view, I think, in a really perfect world, your best team might be if Mookie Betts can play shortstop well. Now, again, that is a really big if. He had a better spring. He didn't have any errors. The team was raving about his offseason work. He even went out to Texas to work with Troy Tulowitzki for a couple of days. He's now an assistant coach there. So there's a lot of optimism that he can do this at a good enough level. I think the question is, again, if it's still inconsistent, if he still isn't playing that spot, at the kind of level you would want as a World Series contending team, I think it is still possible that at some point they shift him back to second, they play Tommy Edman there or Miguel Rojas or do something else. But in the meantime, the Dodgers love optionality. It's one of Andrew Friedman's favorite buzzwords. And I think they're looking at this situation as a chance to give their roster more flexibility. If they can have Mookie Betts play shortstop, they're allowing him to try to do something that he very clearly wants to try to do. And if it doesn't work out, they can always pivot later. So we'll see. I think the place it could get tricky is like, what's the threshold for good enough, right? And if you get later in the season, like, do you really want to move him off a position because he's playing it 90% of the way there? But those are problems they'll deal with later. Right now, they just want to see if he can do it, at a good enough level, which is why, this whole is part of the reason they didn't want to push him in Japan. They didn't want him trying to make this transition at less than 100%, coming off this sickness. Like they wanted to wait until he was back to full strength to put him there, because everything he does, especially early in the season, like every ball that gets hit to him, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on to see exactly how this looks.
So people like to criticize the Dodgers, what they're doing, spend a lot of money. They're a pseudo international team now. And at the other side of that coin, I don't think sometimes they talk enough about, how cutting edge they are in every facet of the game. I mean, player development, analytics. They even have or own kind of a startup that looks to try to do apps. They do all kinds of crazy, great, smart things, both baseball, revenue generation, and how they really created this machine. Is it, part of being owned by one of the most successful private equity companies? It's just a different level of baseball thought altogether about how to operate a baseball team.
I think a lot of it starts with, Andrew Freeman and ownership's decision to not just hire him back in 2014, but to bring him in and give him every resource he could ask for, right? Like the joke was, imagine Andrew Friedman with money when he was running the Rays. And that's basically what the Dodgers did. To his credit, he's used that money well, and not just on the roster, on a lot of different facets. The Dodgers, like you said, I have been at the forefront of a lot of the pitching development changes in the sport. They were one of the first teams to not just embrace like the driveline training methods, but also hire people directly from driveline to help run their pitching department. They've built out a robust analytics staff, a robust game planning operation. Is one of the things, like when you talk to players, like the way they game plan on a game to game basis and the information they have and just the number of people that help put all that together is, unmatched, or at least at the top of the spectrum in Major League Baseball. And, Andrew Friedman has been able to keep a lot of his core group together and then replace guys who did end up leaving, like a Farhan Zaidi, who's actually back this year on kind of an advisor role, like an Alex Anthopoulos when he left. But, they've been able to, I think, just pour so many resources and ideas into so many different parts of the organization. Now, given all that, a lot of this, didn't work sometimes. There was a reason that the team, hadn't won a full season World Series until last year. Their problems with pitching injuries are also at the forefront of the sport right now. And the fact that, it seems like not so much of a coincidence that all this embrace of kind of modern pitching development has also come with a lot more injuries to young pitchers in their organization than you see most other teams having. But then this is the second part, which is when they do make mistakes or they do need to try to fill holes on their roster or overcome maybe other deficiencies, they can go out and they can spend money. And when they have spent money, they have done it very well. There are not been a lot of bad misses on big contracts that they've had, at least when it comes to player performance. Like honestly, the Trevor Bauer debacle is probably the biggest miss that they've had. And that was, again, something that was a very atypical situation, to put it lightly. So it's been that combination of, I think, having stability, cultivating innovation within the organization, having the resources to then back that up and maximize every little edge you can find. And then when you do have to fill holes on the big league roster, you can go out and you can also spend in free agency. And then, it helped that Shohei Ohtani basically wrote them a blank check last offseason to come and play for them and take no money up front and allow them to enjoy all of the marketing and revenue benefits that have come along with that I think has kind of helped be that last piece that took them from one of the best teams in baseball to now a team that, at least on paper, has this roster that seems so kind of just in a different stratosphere than any other team when it comes to the talent and the depth and all the different options that they have. And there's a lot of different reasons they've gotten to that point.
Do you see the Dodgers slowing down at all, like from a spending standpoint? When Tarik Skubal becomes a free agent after the 2026 season, and let's say that this guy is going to become the first $400 million pitcher in MLB history. Let's just say that's the case. If the Dodgers want him, the Dodgers get him. Like, is that how that's going to work?
I think if the Dodgers want somebody right now, they are going to be able to pay just about anything that said player could want. Now, that said, like, they still do operate within some, like, they're a model team, right? So they're not just going to go overpay for top of the market players just because they've decided we have to get him, and that's the end of the story, right? Like, if that was the case, Juan Soto would be a Dodger right now. And they didn't really make the most competitive bid to get him. Even trying to re-sign somebody like Teoscar Hernandez this offseason encountered some challenges because they wanted to do deferred money and do, this kind of contract structure they've used with a lot of other players lately to kind of spread out some of the spending. So I do think that there are still limits in which they won't go for value reasons, and probably some spending limits when it comes to just, even at some point, like Guggenheim and the Ohtani benefits, like, the money isn't endless. But I do think they're in a position where, like, they have a $400 million luxury tax payroll just about this year. I think given the way they've kind of set up the long-term salary structures of their payroll with all these deferred contracts, given the fact that Ohtani, is making them, it seems pretty safe to guess, over $100 million in marketing revenue every year while making a $2 million salary. Like, that's only going to continue to benefit them. And I think, like, the part that can't be overstated here is the Ohtani factor. Like, when he signed and the structure of that deal was announced, like, I had one agent who explained to me, it was like, this could be $1 billion opportunity for them if you just think about the money that they were going to make and be able to use and invest over the next 10 years before they have to pay him. And I had some doubts about that theory, but I think the way you've seen them spend money since then kind of confirms, like, okay, that was a really transformational kind of point in terms of how aggressive they were going to be when it comes to spending. And I think, especially on the pitching side, when it comes to somebody like a Tarik Skubal, who I'm sure that they were one of the teams that was just hoping that Scott Harris would discuss Tarik Skubal at the trade deadline last season. So I think if they identify somebody that they really like and they want to get and, can get it done within their kind of range of values, they're going to be competitive for free agents moving forward. And they're going to be able to, I think, probably the easiest way to put this is kind of sustain this level of payroll that they are at currently, which again is, I think it's like $75 million more than any other team at the moment.
All right, so for all Tigers fans, Tarik Skubal may be a Dodger, but they're not going to overpay. Look, we've asked about the superstars, and you've been great on all that, but tell us about some of the names, on the Dodgers roster that maybe Tigers fans need to know about that no one's really talking about, especially as we get ready to jump into a 3-game series.
I think, Tanner Scott being on this team is one of the things that probably got a little bit overlooked this offseason, but the Dodgers haven't had a clear closer for the last couple of years, and he's probably going to be the closest thing to that and kind of sets up the rest of their bullpen to make that another just really strong, defendable unit. Teoscar Hernandez became like really one of the most important players on this team last year outside of the superstar guys, not only because he kind of slotted into that cleanup spot where he was the one cashing in on a lot of the opportunities that were created by Ohtani and Mookie and Freddie being on base in front of him, but also brought kind of a different emotional dynamic in the clubhouse that ended up being really important during the postseason. On the pitching staff side, Dustin May might get a chance to pitch in this weekend series. We're still waiting on the full pitching schedule there, but he's back in the rotation coming off of, his own like couple years being out with injuries, but his stuff's looked pretty good. He's always been one of the more interesting pitchers in their organization and somebody that, has really looked for a long time like he could be a star if he could just stay healthy. And then Andy Pages is their number 9 hitter. He had a decent rookie year last year in the outfield, and I think has being the number 9 hitter in this lineup is so important because you're the guy hitting in front of Ohtani, and you're going to get a lot of opportunities because of that. And as someone I think could have a pretty big year and already put together a couple just good looking games in Japan where he was drawing walks and taking professional at bats and things like that. So there's not a lot of holes. Again, it's a pretty loaded team and full of guys who again are coming off of a really impressive postseason last year. So those are kind of some of the names I think are interesting. Michael Conforto is new to the team, but it's a lot of known commodities at this point.
You also have a really versatile player you traded for and then re-signed last year, Tommy Edman, kind of quietly a really useful, good player, a Dodger kind of player, I think. So there's another one I think sometimes people overlook. He's a damn good player, Tommy Edman.
Yeah, and just like he stepped right into the number 2 spot in the Japan games with Mookie and Freddie out and had a really big series, hit a home run. Like that was like the joke last year. He got to the Dodgers. He started hitting home runs. They nicknamed him Tommy Tanks. And, he struggled batting from the left side of the plate last year. And if he could even out those splits, he's going to could be a pretty lethal player for them too, somewhere in the middle of the lineup.
You got Tommy Tanks and Shotgun Sasaki. Anybody else?
Any other good nicknames?
Those are 2 good ones, though. That's all I'm saying.
But I'm trying to, yeah.
We're curious, man. The National League West shaping up to be a really great division yet again. Dodgers, obviously the favorites, no doubt about that. But does any team stand a chance? Like, is there any reason for the Dodgers to be concerned whatsoever about winning the division? Like anything that could possibly hold them back from, winning the NL West?
I mean, the Diamondbacks pitching staff, like this has been, I think, the thing with the D-backs forever now, right? It's like, well, just imagine if they could pitch in that ballpark and with the kind of lineups like they usually have. And that's a team that if you'd probably need like an almost 100% outcome on the range of outcome scale or whatever. But if they get Burns pitching well and Gallen pitching well and Merrill Kelly pitching well and they're all staying healthy, and like that's a team that, with a lineup that should be pretty good, with a bullpen that has some nice pieces, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they're pushing the Dodgers late into the season. Even last year, like the Padres were right there up until the last week of the season with the Dodgers in the NL West race. It came down to a series in LA where it was actually like, that's where Freddie Freeman sprained his ankle, was in one of those games the night that the Dodgers eventually clinched the division. I just think the difference with the Dodgers this year is, the past couple years when things go wrong, it's usually because of injuries and starting pitching injuries specifically. And this year, there's just, at some point, Clayton Kershaw's going to rejoin the rotation. Tony Gonsolin is back this year after a Tommy John surgery. He's starting on the IL because he tweaked his back lifting weights, but they don't think that's going to be serious. Landon Knack was somebody who was really good as a rookie last year and wasn't really even close to making the opening day rotation. Bobby Miller is a guy trying to bounce back. Nick Frasso is a young pitcher that they think, could impact their big league rotation this year. And then even if things do start to go wrong, they can always add at the deadline. Jack Flaherty ended up being one of the guys that kind of saved their season last year. And it's just, that's where I think even with last year's team, it was easy to envision, okay, if Yamamoto gets hurt, Tyler Glasnow gets hurt, a couple other things go wrong, like this could get a little dicey on him. And it did. It's really tough to see that happening with this year's team when you have, again, literally 5 guys who could be potential aces in the rotation without really much stretch of the imagination. When you have as many good bullpen arms as they do, and when you have the kind of lineup they do. So not impossible. I think a team like the D-backs kind of is another potentially really well-rounded unit that could win a lot of games this year. But I think like the Dodgers win total over under right now is 105 or something, which is just absurd, but is also probably about right for this team when you look at it on paper.
All right, Jack, that's all we have for you, but thanks for joining Days of Roar. The Dodgers are a team that every baseball fan is interested in, and the Tigers are playing them in a few days. You delivered all the good stuff. We really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Everyone, that was Jack Harris, award-winning LA Times beat writer covering the Dodgers. We have more to discuss about the Tigers as opening day is right around the corner. But first, let's take a break.
It was Jack Harris from the LA Times. Hope you enjoyed it. Thought he had a lot of interesting things to say. I mean, seeing Shohei Ohtani in Japan, how cool is that, Al? I mean, seriously. All right, let's get back into it and get out of here. Question for you. Does Gleyber Torres need to move off second base for the Tigers? And are we crazy to even discuss that now? And do you think it's going to happen at any point in time during the season?
I think it's such a fascinating question. It's something that I've been pondering for a few weeks now. Like, the Tigers have really built their recent success on a culture where the team is more important than any individual. Like, look at what they did last year, whether it's, Kerry Carpenter is in the game and he gets pulled for Andy Ibanez and Andy Ibanez gets the pinch hit opportunity. Like, Kerry Carpenter understands that it's not about him. It's about the fact that Andy Ibanez is just so good against lefties that Andy Ibanez is going to get that opportunity. And there's no hard feelings there at all. Like, that's the Tigers culture that they built. That's like a one small example of it, right? And with that in mind, I just wonder if Gleyber Torres? Like, does he hurt the Tigers more than he actually helps them? Like, we know he's going to help them offensively. We know what he's going to do with the bat. Like, this is a guy who's been an all-star before. But I wonder, like, the whole second base thing, right? Like, the Tigers go out and they sign him, and to get him to sign a 1-year, $15 million contract, and Gleyber Torres, by the way, he's already thinking about next year's free agency, trying to make over $100 million. But for the Tigers to get him to sign 1 year, $15 million, they had to promise him that he would be their everyday second baseman. So therefore, Colt Keith had to move to first base, a position that he's never played. And it makes me wonder, like, what happens if Spencer Torkelson actually rakes? Like, whether he is on the opening day roster or he's in AAA Toledo, like, what if he actually rakes? Like, what if he is a guy who has now figured out with his swing and he is a 250 hitter with 25 plus home runs, and Colt Keith is really bad at first base from a defensive standpoint, and you've got Spencer Torkelson sitting there ready to go, but he can't play there because Colt Keith can't move back to second base because Gleyber Torres is at second base. Or what happens if Justyn-Henry Malloy, he proves himself as an everyday hitter? Let's say he makes the opening day roster, and not only does he rake against the lefties, but he also rakes against the righties too. And you have some of these injured players coming back, and there just isn't room for Jahan in the outfield. But Jahan has been playing first base a little bit more, and he added that to his skill set here in spring training. So let's say that Jahan doesn't fit in the outfield, but he's raking, and you want to get his bat in the lineup. Well, you can't play him at first base because Colt Keith has to play first base, because Gleyber Torres has to play second base. And so that's kind of where I'm at, like the two hypothetical scenarios of, like, what if Torkelson hits? What if Jahan hits? Like, how do you get those guys in the lineup if Colt Keith is at first base because Gleyber Torres has to be at second base? Because the Tigers have no choice but to play Keith at first base. Like, Colt Keith has to play first because they signed Gleyber Torres to play second. Meanwhile, you have a guy like Kerry Carpenter. Tigers probably prefer to keep him as their primary designated hitter when all these guys are healthy, because they want to keep Kerry Carpenter healthy. He hasn't gotten through a full big league season without an injury. So when you have Matt Vierling healthy and Parker Meadows healthy, we're going to see Kerry Carpenter at designated hitter more often than not. And then on top of that, Colt Keith, he can't just go play third base because there's injury concerns with the labrum in his right shoulder. He injured that back in the minor leagues, never got surgery on it. And now there's just a little bit of a concern, especially with him at third base, which is why he moved to second base anyway. And now he's at first base, obviously. So, like, I don't know, like, how does Torkelson or Malloy fit into the regular lineup? Like, if they can hit, how do they fit? Well, the easy solution would be Gleyber Torres moves to third base, Colt Keith switches back to second base, and either Torkelson or Malloy, they take over as the everyday first baseman. But Torres doesn't want to move to third base. He declined to switch from second to third with the Yankees last season, and he turned down an offer from the Nationals this offseason because they wanted him at third. So it just makes me wonder, will Gleyber Torres, or would he even consider it for these Tigers, these culture-driven Tigers? Would Gleyber Torres decide, you know what? Yeah, I'll go play third base because it means getting Torkelson in the lineup, or it means getting Jahan in the lineup. I'll go to third base. Or is Gleyber Torres going to say, nope, I'm a second baseman. You signed me to play second base, and I'm not moving? Because that's exactly what he did when the New York Yankees got Jazz Chisholm last year. He wouldn't move off second base. And it just makes me wonder, yes, he's going to be great with the bat. He's going to be helpful for sure. But does he hurt more than he helps if he doesn't buy into that culture of the team is more important than any individual? And again, this is all assuming that Torkelson or Justyn-Henry Malloy end up actually hitting. Like, if these guys don't hit, it doesn't really matter anyway. But if they do, I wonder if Gleyber Torres would be willing to move off second base for the Tigers. Right now, I lean no, just considering everything. You know, when you paint the picture, it doesn't seem like Gleyber Torres would want to move to third base. But you know what? Never say never. When you start winning, anything can happen.
I think that's a perfect way to explain it. But more importantly, Gleyber Torres, $100 million. I'm in love with that idea. You know why? Gleyber Torres thinks he's getting $100 million. He's obviously OPSing 930 this year. So, which I think is not happening, but he did once hit 38 home runs. So if he'd like to hit 27 home runs and have an 890 OPS for the Detroit Tigers, I'm all on board. He can play second base every single day. We can play more than second base. He can do anything you want.
What if he doesn't? Remember, let's not forget, Gleyber Torres was an all-star in 2018 and 2019. And in those seasons, because you want to go back and you want to look at the OPS, it was an 820 OPS in 2018, an 871 OPS in 2019. It was 24 home runs in 2018 and then 38 home runs in 2019. He has not done that since.
Correct.
His best year since then was 2023 when he had an 800 OPS. So what if he is more like a 700, 750 OPS guy? Should he be able to plant his flag in the ground and say, I am your second baseman? Or is that a situation where if you're not hitting up to that standard of, 800, 820, 850 OPS, do you really get to have a say? I mean, maybe you do, but then it just causes problems.
Yeah, you always have a say, dude. I mean, you're only here for a year. They're not going to get into, a war of wills with Gleyber Torres this year. And in fact, they likely promised him he would play second base. That's why he's here. At the same time, let me say this to you. You hang out with AJ Hinch literally every day. And when it comes to being a persuasive human being in a baseball locker room, pretty persuasive in a good way.
He has the buy-in touch. And that's something that other managers, I've talked to other managers around the league, and they've said the one thing that really impresses them about AJ Hinch, the one thing that they can't quite put their finger on. Yes, he makes the chess moves and he does, he manages the bullpen excellent. He does the pinch hitters. He did pitching chaos. But the one thing that other managers say that really stands out to them above all else is the fact that he can get players to buy into anything.
So what I'm saying is, at some point in time this year, it would not shock me based upon lots of weird things that can happen. I'm not going to go into all the conspiracy theories. Okay. However, to be honest with you, I don't see Gleyber Torres' future as a second baseman. He's just getting too big and too slow and too lateral movement compromised. And he can swing the bat. If you haven't learned that Gleyber Torres can swing the bat and he's a tough out, you have not watched him play yet. So I just think he'd actually be a pretty solid third baseman and could make a lot of money at third base, especially if he's going to 800 OPS, which I think he can do. And if he went to third base, that lets Cole Keith move to second base. It lets Torkelson or Jahmai play first base. They can mess around DHing. I also weirdly looked something up while we've been doing the pod. And, Manny Margot in 217 at-bats in 2023 against right-handers hit 258. So it's not like Manny Margot can't hit right-handers. He has hit right-handers. Not super powerful, but, decently enough. If he had to play there for a week or two, he probably could. So I think you get in trouble when you play Manny Margot too much, but he is a pro and he can hit a little bit. As far as Gleyber Torres, I sent you a message today. Let's tell everybody what I sent you. I said, in 2026, late 2026, they could have a real issue. They might have 4 first basemen. What are they going to do? Colt Keith, Josu Briseño, Justyn-Henry Malloy, Spencer Torkelson. 4 first basemen. And that's assuming that Tehran Lorenzo can catch. If he can't catch, he's a first baseman. So now you got 5 of them. You can't get Cole Keith out of the lineup. Where's he going to play? Got to play. So unless he's going to be the worst armed right fielder in Major League Baseball, where he goes back to second base, they're going to need to resolve it in some way. So I think the Tigers, I would not be shocked if Gleyber Torres at some point in time is convinced that maybe for the best of his own career and simultaneously for the best of the Detroit Tigers' chances at winning, he needs to consider playing third base. So that's my 2 cents on that. All right. The Tigers appear to have 1 bullpen spot remaining, 3 relievers in the mix. Who gets the spot?
Yeah, Andrew Chafin, Brenan Hanifee, Brant Herter. Who gets that final spot? That's the big question. I think it's going to be Andrew Chafin, but I know AJ Hinch likes Brant Herter. Who doesn't like Brant Herter? And I think Brenan Hanifee deserves it based on the spring training results. So again, when you put all those puzzle pieces together, who really knows? I mean, all these pitchers, they showed glimpses of success in spring training, but Hanifee was the most consistent of the group. He was straight up dominant in spring training. But again, the Tigers will tell you it's not an ERA contest. And they told that to their pitchers. They told that to their position players, that it's not a batting average or OPS contest. Like, that's not the end all be all. There's going to be a lot of things that are taken into consideration when it comes to the moves that are made and the choices that are made when it comes to roster cuts and who makes a team and who doesn't. Like, Andrew Chafin has a very valuable track record as an 11-year MLB veteran, but at the same time, he signed a minor league contract. So he can be assigned to AAA Toledo. You look at the spring training results, Chafin, he struggled, only got into 6 games, 6 walks, 7 strikeouts, but he was better at the end. He really struggled out of the gate, but once he kind of locked it in, he improved significantly. Hanifee didn't allow a run in spring training, 3 walks, 8 strikeouts, 9 2/3 innings in 8 games. And then Brant Herter, he also got better as it went along as well. He struggled early and then he got better as well. 4 walks, 9 strikeouts, 11 2/3 innings in 6 games for him. I don't know. It's hard to pick. Andrew Chafin, Brenan Hanifee, Brant Herter. I think it's going to be Andrew Chafin just because of the track record, the fact that he's missed bats at the big league level. He's shown that he can do that over and over and over again. But man, Brenan Hanifee was great, and love Brant Herter and everything that he's given to the Tigers, especially when you look back to what he did during their postseason run, or their run to the postseason and then throughout. I don't know. We'll see. Do you have any indication, Mark, of what you think might happen, whether it's Chafin, Hanifee, or Herter?
I think it's a shanda that Brendan Hanifee is not on the roster. Oh my God, it's the worst. I can't. You're going to tell me he's not one of the best 8 relief pitchers they have? Get the hell out of here. Now, look, I understand that Maeda needs to be on the team temporarily, especially because you also need guys to be able to go 3-4 innings and mop up when you're getting your ass tanned. And that's going to happen. And that's when Kenta Maeda is going to have to absorb some punishment. At the same time, I just think the way that AJ likes to play chess, it'll be hard not to take Chafin. I mean, his outing yesterday, I thought it was an immaculate inning. I got distracted. I missed the first pitch. I tweeted it. Be mad at me. Put a bad review on the podcast. But the next 9 pitches after he missed on the first pitch, all strikes, 5 swinging. It was beautiful. It looked very Chafin-ish. He still was only throwing 90, 91. That's definitely concerning to everyone. But the other issue that I want to bring up about this, though, is they may send Chafin to Toledo for 2 weeks just to get him working 3-4 times a week, get him built up more. Because once he's here, if he sucks, they can't demote him. But if they send him to Toledo, they can promote him. So the only thing that's in the favor of Brendan Hanifee would be if that is how they think about it. And it's not a bad way to think about it for a 26-week, 162-game season. The other really weird thing that we are not considering in any way, shape, or form, Jason Foley is throwing 94 in at 0.5 miles an hour. He didn't exactly kill it this sprint. Been better lately, but still not.
Mark, it was 0 walks, 10 strikeouts, and 6 1/3 innings for Jason Foley. 0 walks, 10 strikeouts, 6 1/3 innings in 7 games.
All right. So, like I said, still wasn't real good the first.
It's not an ERA contest, though. But I think you're right. No, you're right to point out the concerns because the concerns are real. I'm just not at that level yet.
All right. Well, he has 2 options left. So it does give them some flexibility to demote him. But I got to tell you, it's nice to have depth. I mean, it's not like who do we have to keep because all these guys suck. It's who do we have to demote that deserves to be here? Brant Herter needs to go to Toledo and start, to be honest with you. I don't even think that was a consideration. I think we will see him, but this is between Hanifee and Chafin and maybe Foley. So we'll see how it works out, and it should be very interesting who they choose. Who do you think they're choosing? You think they're choosing Chafin, huh?
Yeah, I already said I think they're choosing Chafin.
All right, my man. It's time to get out of here. I want to remind everybody to please rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and especially YouTube. You can always find us embedded in every Evan Petzold article at The Free. I'd like to thank the editor of The Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, the magic man, Robin Chan, who has to put up with me every week. Love to my amazing grandsons. They are so cute. And the future mama, the star of our show for real. Can't wait to see what the baby is and what the baby's name is. Shout out to Savannah Petzold. Until next week, peace.